Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
Her laughter wasn't meant for me. It sliced through the hallway from behind the closed door of our bedroom, that half-suppressed giggle echoing in a way I'd never heard from her before. It was intimate, bright yet subdued, like a sudden spark in the dark. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Part of me, the tired, rational part, told me to walk away, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But there was another part, raw and curious, that forced my palm against the wood. It turned so easily, as though fate were pushing my fingers along, and in the next moment, the door inched open. I glimpsed her reflection in the dresser mirror first. She was leaning against the bed, wearing only a slip that clung to her hips. There was movement behind her, a silhouette, broad shoulders, shirt unbuttoned. The way he held her. God, I can't forget the way his hand cupped her cheek, and the small sigh she let out when his thumb brushed her lips. I could see the tension in her shoulders shift into a languid melt as he pulled her closer. Another sound escaped her, something more than a laugh, something deeper. I shouldn't have been there. This was their moment, secret, forbidden, laced with breathy hunger. And I stood there, invisible but shaking with an anger and heartbreak so violent it nearly blinded me. I wanted to storm in, scream, hit him, yank him away from her. But my throat closed up, the air too thick to let out a single word. It was like my legs forgot how to move. My entire body felt like lead. Instead, I took a single step back and let the door slowly settle into its frame again. The latch clicked, and for one awful heartbeat, I thought they'd heard me. But the laughter resumed. Hers, then his, lower in pitch, smug. Like a man who'd just confirmed he had the right to do what he was doing. I found myself downstairs a moment later, not entirely sure how I'd made it there. My heart battered my ribs. I stared at the living room wall, at that photo of us smiling on our wedding day, my arm around her waist. I remember thinking, that's us. That was supposed to last forever. And now I'm not even the one making her laugh. I paced across the living room, unsteady. The air felt thick, like standing outside before a thunderstorm. My foot struck something on the ground, a child's plastic toy, some leftover from when our daughter was younger. I nearly tripped. A mad thought crossed my mind. Maybe I should just hurl it at the nearest wall. Make noise, disrupt their little scene upstairs. But I couldn't. My chest burned with unspoken fury. My throat was raw from the urge to shout. I reached the balcony door and slid it open. The cold night breeze hit me like a slap, but I stepped outside anyway, barefoot. The ground stung my soles. I didn't care. The city lights sprawled below, indifferent to my heartbreak. My lips trembled, and I tried to draw a deep breath. That was when I realized I was shaking, my hands, my legs, everything. I wanted to smoke, but I hadn't touched a cigarette in years, not since the accident. Ever since the coma, I'd had these occasional blank spots in my memory. My muscles locked from the memory of that time in the hospital, tubes in my arms, doctors talking in hushed voices. I told myself I wouldn't let anything drive me back to old vices. But right then, the craving for nicotine was nearly as overwhelming as the pain in my chest. I ran a hand over my face, pushing back hair that had fallen across my forehead. For one fleeting second, I questioned whether this was really happening. Maybe I was still in that coma, dreaming up nightmares about my wife's betrayal. But the cold concrete under my feet told me I was wide awake. The next moment, I heard movement inside the house. Soft footsteps on the stairs, a brief hush of conversation. I braced myself. She came down first, wearing a casual robe now, hair slightly mussed, cheeks still flushed. He followed at a distance, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive dress shirt. My stomach twisted at the sight of him in my home. Our home. They froze when they saw me standing there behind the screen door. She parted her lips, eyes wide, as if she'd just remembered I existed. "Michael," she said, almost breathlessly. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. My heart hammered. The lover, Tom, I would later learn more about him than I ever wanted to, set a protective hand on her shoulder, or maybe it was possessive, and she didn't shrug it off. Rage boiled in me, but I just pressed my palm flat against the glass door, letting it vibrate with my unsteady breath. She tried to speak again, but the words died on her tongue. Instead, she quietly slipped away from him, crossing to me. She reached to open the screen door. The living room lamp cast a harsh glow over her features. There was guilt, oh yes, in her eyes. But also something else, defiance, or perhaps the kind of resignation that forms when secrets are finally forced into the light. She parted the door by a few inches. "Let's talk. Please." Her voice trembled. I swallowed, tried to speak, and all that came out was a ragged, "You should go. Both of you." The words sounded lifeless to my ears, but they carried enough weight to make her flinch. Tom stepped forward, brows knitted. "Look, man." But he trailed off, apparently not finding the right phrase for the situation. He shot me a glance that was both wary and arrogant, as if he was trying to determine whether I was about to physically confront him. I repeated, "Get out." My voice was hoarse, but it worked. He turned, grabbed his jacket off the couch, and walked toward the door. She hesitated, looking from me to him. Eventually, as though not wanting him to leave alone, she followed him to the front hallway. That stung so deeply, watching her take his side, or at least wanting to make sure he was okay. They exchanged a few terse whispers near the door. Then he left. She stood there in silence, shoulders slumped. In the hush that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stepped back in from the balcony, letting the screen door slide shut behind me. The hush deepened. She looked like she was searching for words, her mouth opening and closing. I watched her, feeling a tear threaten to crawl out the corner of my eye, but I blinked it away. Something about the tension made me want to fill the silence, to hurl accusations, to demand an explanation. But no words came. My voice had abandoned me. Finally, she spoke, quietly. "I wanted to tell you. I didn't know how." I managed a bitter laugh. It sounded like a bark, strangled and low. "Well, you sure found a way." Her eyes welled up, but no tears fell. She took a small step toward me, and I backed away as though from a flame. She wanted to close the gap, touch my hand, perhaps, but I wasn't ready to let her. A swirl of rage and love warred in my chest, tangling my emotions until I couldn't tell which was which. "Michael, it just happened," she said, voice shaking. "We drifted apart. And then, after the accident, you were so distant. You barely remembered yourself, let alone me." The mention of my accident was a punch to my gut. For a moment, I was right back there in that hospital bed, tubes snaking into my arms, a maddening beep 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 from the monitors. My memory from those days was patchy. The coma, the lengthy rehab, the blank spaces that still popped up when I tried to recall certain events. I shook my head to dispel the dizziness. My voice returned raw. I was fighting to come back to life. She let out a trembling sigh. "I know. I'm sorry. Please believe me, I never wanted it to turn into this." I stared at her for a moment, unblinking. Her robe was carelessly tied, the hollow of her throat showing a bruise that definitely wasn't from me. My gaze latched onto it, and my stomach churned. I shoved past her, heading for the stairs. My legs felt numb. I just needed to get away from that open robe and that hideous bruise. Let me close my eyes. Let me breathe. Halfway up the stairs, I felt a tremor in my knees. I gripped the banister to keep myself upright. A wave of memory, or maybe imagination, rolled over me. Her laughter, muffled moans, the slight squeak of bed springs. My own bed. The sheets we bought together on that trip to the store, joking about thread counts. Now corrupted. A lump forced its way into my throat, and for a fleeting second, I thought I might collapse. My mind was reeling with images I never asked for, but that had found a permanent home behind my eyelids. She didn't follow me. At the top of the stairs, the door to our bedroom was partially open, and I could see the half-disarray inside. Pillows tossed aside, the bedspread askew, a subtle imprint on the comforter telling me exactly where they'd been. I stepped inside, refusing to let myself run. The smell was different, almost electric, and it felt like I'd stepped into a crime scene. Because for me it was. My marriage had just been murdered right here. I looked around for something, anything, to hold on to. My eyes landed on a pair of pajamas draped over the chair. They were old, well-worn. The marker scrawl on the collar read, "For my beloved." It wasn't my handwriting. It certainly wasn't hers. That casual, looping script told me it was his, Tom's. A wave of nausea sent me staggering. I grabbed hold of the chair, my knuckles white. I can't explain why, but seeing that casual declaration of possession, my beloved, cut deeper than if I'd seen them in the act 100 times. It felt personal, like a stake hammered through my heart. This was more than lust. This was a claim. I wanted to tear those pajamas to shreds, but I just stood there, paralyzed. My reflection in the bedroom mirror caught my attention. I looked pale, haunted, an echo of the man I used to be before the accident. And I thought, she was living another life, while I was barely relearning how to walk, how to remember my own name. I felt an upsurge of bitterness, a savage sense of betrayal that tasted like metal in my mouth. "Michael." Her voice came from the hallway. I turned to see her standing there, robe clutched tighter now, expression taut with pain. She took another step in. "I'll pack a bag and go if that's what you want." She was giving me an out, or maybe giving herself an out. Something snapped in me. I flung the pajamas onto the floor like evidence in a trial. "What I want," I rasped. My voice cracked mid-syllable, raw with fury and heartbreak. I wanted to save my marriage. I wanted you to wait for me, to help me remember what we had. I guess that was too much. She looked at the pajamas, eyes shining with tears that still refused to fall. "I didn't plan this, Michael," she whispered. "I swear. We were working together on a project. Then he just what? Showed you how a real man does it." My words came out low and venomous, shocking even me. I don't usually speak that way. But the image of them together, her soft giggling, and his assured presence, hammered at my thoughts. "Stop it," she said, voice trembling. "You don't know how lonely it was." I barked out a laugh that hurt my chest. Lonely. My entire existence the past few years had been a seesaw between physical therapy, nightmares, and incomplete memories. Meanwhile, she'd found solace in someone else's arms. Maybe it was the scariest moment for her too, seeing me fade in and out of consciousness, or hearing the doctors say I might never recover fully. Perhaps in her eyes she was alone. But that knowledge didn't soothe me. Not one bit. I turned away from her, foot connecting with the corner of the bed frame. I muttered a curse under my breath, and then realized she was crying. A strangled sob escaped her. Part of me wanted to comfort her, some insane, lingering protective instinct. But I forced myself to stay still, to let the moment be. She sank onto the edge of the bed, hugging her robe around her shoulders. After a few seconds, she looked up at me, tears shining. "Are you going to say anything?" I closed my eyes, inhaling the shaky breath. "Not now," I said, my voice flat. Then I marched out of the room, out of the house, down onto the street. Barefoot, in my sweats. I didn't realize I'd forgotten my shoes until the asphalt bit into my soles. But I kept going. My mind whirled with everything and nothing. Her betrayal, my memory gaps, the worthless feeling of not being enough. Outside, under the flickering street lamp, I collapsed onto the curb. I stared at the sidewalk cracks, fought the urge to scream until my lungs shredded. The night smelled of city dust, damp grass, and under it all, an inexplicable trace of something like burned sugar. If sin had a scent, I imagined it might be that. The tension hammered in my skull. I tried to recall the fleeting, fuzzy images from that time in the hospital. Did I ever see a sign? Something to warn me that the life I was returning to had changed. The faint hum of a car passing by jolted me. The driver slowed down, probably eyeing the weird man sitting on the curb with no shoes in the dead of night. I refused to look up. The car moved on. I pressed my hands to my face, feeling stubble prick my palms. My mind drifted to our daughter. She was staying over at a friend's place tonight, thank God. I didn't want her to see any of this. She deserved better. Eventually, I forced myself to stand and trudge back inside. The house was dark. A single lamp glowed in the living room, revealing that she'd left. The place felt hollow. And that, ironically, gave me a sliver of relief. I didn't think I could handle another confrontation tonight. I made my way into my study and slumped into the worn-out armchair. My laptop sat on the desk, open to a blank document. I stared at the cursor blinking. Right, I told myself. That's what I do, right? I'm a writer, or at least I pretend to be. Words have always been the only way I know how to process the chaos of my emotions. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but nothing came out. I gave it one more shot. Typed a single line. You are free. But now you are not my choice. I read it over, lips twitching bitterly. It felt like both a condemnation and a plea. Then my arms went limp at my sides, and I drifted into a restless doze in that chair. My dreams were chaotic, fragments of hospital beeps, the squeal of tires on wet asphalt, my wife's voice chanting my name, and a child's laughter. Then that nightmare scene. She led me and my daughter into some unfamiliar house. We walked through corridors, and there were people waiting. Meet them, she said, Jenny and Tom, your children too. My dream self froze. The dream me stared at them. These two strangers who wore my features yet didn't. My daughter's hand shook in mine, and I felt my face go numb. I woke up gasping, the taste of dread coating my tongue. I found morning light creeping through the curtains. My body ached. The single line on the screen seared into my eyes. You are free. But now you are not my choice. I wasn't even sure what I'd meant by that, but something about it rang true, like an ultimatum or a farewell note. I forced myself to my feet, ignoring the protesting ache in my back. My phone buzzed. A text from her. Can we talk? I let it sit there, unanswered. Over the next hours, I drifted around the house like a ghost, stepping over the debris of our shared life. I found her perfume bottle on the bathroom counter, her comb still tangled with a few dark hairs. My reflection in the mirror glowered back at me, disheveled hair, stubble, hollow eyes. I turned away, remembering the uneasy days after my coma, when I used to stare into the mirror trying to piece together who I was. That same sense of disorientation clawed at me now. At some point, my phone rang, cutting through the thick silence. I checked the screen. Tom's name, displayed in bold. A surge of anger made me want to smash the phone. Instead, I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, a voicemail notification popped up. I didn't listen to it. Couldn't. Instead, I found an old notebook, grabbed a pen, and started scrawling out fragments of memory and feeling. It was messy, half-finished sentences and scribbled lines, but I kept going. I wrote about how we first met, the small details that made me fall in love with her, the slow fade of that love, my blank moments in rehab, the distance growing like ivy between us. Then I wrote about the pajamas, how the words "my beloved" felt like a brand on my soul. My pen tore the paper in places from the force of my grip. By evening, I managed to stand and throw on some clothes. I needed fresh air again. To hell with letting the house suffocate me. I walked out, footsteps shuffling. The early sunset cast everything in a golden gloom. My mind whirled with no sense of direction. I ended up at a small park, where I sank onto a bench near the duck pond. The water was still, reflecting a sky bruised with purples and oranges. I rubbed my hands over my face. A memory bobbed to the surface. Rebecca and I feeding ducks here with our daughter, tossing breadcrumbs on a sunny afternoon. Laughter, the real kind, bright and genuine. And now all I could hear in my head was her breathy laugh meant for someone else. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice a presence until she spoke. Michael. Her voice was tentative. I looked up and found her standing a few feet away, hugging her coat around her. She must have guessed I'd come here. It was our park. Our place. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The golden twilight made the tears in her eyes more visible. "May I sit?" I shrugged. She took it as a yes and sank down beside me, leaving a careful distance. A breeze rustled the leaves, and I smelled her perfume, faint but distinct. That old familiar ache tugged at my chest. "Have you spoken with our daughter?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "Not yet. She's still at her friend's place. I told her to stay another night." I paused. I figured we needed to figure out what the hell is happening first. She nodded, exhaling slowly. "We owe her something better than this." She stared at the pond. Ducks bobbed aimlessly, unconcerned with the tragedy playing out on the bench. "Michael, I don't even know where to begin." "How about the truth?" I said, as calmly as I could manage. "Tell me how long it's been going on." Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. "Over a year," she confessed. My breath hitched. A year. That was longer than I'd suspected. My fingers clenched. But she continued. "It started out as friendship. We were on a recruitment project together, traveling sometimes. Then It's stupid, but I felt listened to. I felt seen. You were so distant. Again, I'm not blaming you. God knows you'd been through so much. But She trailed off, tears clinging to her lashes. She wiped them quickly, looking almost angry at herself. "He made me feel alive. I was drowning in guilt. I kept telling myself I'd stop. Then I couldn't. I closed my eyes. A year. And all that time, I was stumbling through therapy sessions, trying to find my footing again in the world." Meanwhile, she found a second life. "Are you in love with him?" I asked quietly, forcing myself to utter the words even though they felt like shards of glass in my mouth. She hesitated, eyes rimmed with red. I don't know," she whispered finally. "I told myself it was just closeness, comfort. But love?" She shook her head, swallowing. "I do know that I still love you. It's not the same as before. But it's there." I let out a low exhale, my anger flaring again. "Don't say that." Her voice grew urgent. "But it's true. This was never about not loving you." I laughed bitterly, massaging my temples as if to ease a headache. Could have fooled me. She bit her lip, silent now. I turned my gaze to the water, trying to anchor myself. The next words out of my mouth surprised even me. "I'm the one who nearly died, you know," I said, my voice trembling. "I was the one in that coma, hooking myself back into the land of the living. But now I feel like you got lost somewhere else. I don't even know who you are anymore." She bowed her head, tears slipping free. Silence stretched. Eventually, she reached out, just a light touch on my arm. "I understand if you never forgive me." I didn't pull away. But I didn't reach back. A tear slid down my cheek, unbidden. "I have no idea how to handle this," I admitted, raw honesty scraping my voice. "Part of me wants to storm out of here and slam every door in your face. But there's a bigger part that just doesn't want to lose you." She let out a choked sob, pressing her fingertips to her lips. "You won't. Or maybe you already have. I'm so sorry, Michael." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "He's not going to just vanish. He works with me. But if you say the word, I'll resign. What good will that do?" I demanded, my voice rough. "You can resign from your job, but you can't resign from what you did, from the choices you made." She closed her eyes. Another gust of wind rippled across the pond's surface. I felt my composure fraying. Finally, she stood up, wiping her tears away fiercely. "Let me drive you home," she offered, voice trembling. "We'll figure this out. Together." I almost refused, but something about the emptiness around me made me realize I shouldn't be wandering aimlessly. And maybe there was a twisted part of me that wanted her to see me as I was, broken, betrayed, but still capable of deciding my own fate. So I got up, and we left the park in tense silence. The ride was quiet, broken only by our breathing and the hum of the engine. When we pulled into the driveway, I glanced up at the house that was once my sanctuary. Now it felt like a stage set for a tragedy. I muttered a terse thanks and got out. She followed. I stared at her in the faint glow of the porch light. "You can stay, or you can go. That's your decision," I said. "But I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight." She lowered her gaze. "Okay, I'll stay. I want to talk more. Tomorrow, maybe." I didn't answer, just turned the key in the lock and stepped inside. The air smelled stale, as though it also carried the residue of last night's betrayal. She retreated to our bedroom. Her bedroom. I wasn't sure anymore. And I went to the guest room that doubled as my study. The bed there was narrow, more of a daybed, but at least it offered me space away from the ghosts haunting my usual bed. I slept fitfully, plagued by nightmares. Memories of that hospital bed, of half-forgotten visits from her that blurred into illusions. In one dream, I tried to stand up from the hospital bed, but the floor was made of quicksand, and she was across the room in another man's arms, calling my name, beckoning me to come to her, then turning to laugh with him. I woke drenched in sweat, cursing the moonlight that seeped through the curtains. Morning came slow and heavy. I made coffee out of habit and sipped it in the kitchen. The silence in the house felt like a coiled snake ready to strike. Eventually, she emerged, wearing a tired expression and hugging her robe closed. I motioned toward the coffee pot. She nodded a silent thanks and poured a cup. For a minute, we just stared at our mugs, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I cleared my throat. "Our daughter's coming home today." She nodded. "Should we? How do we explain this to her?" My eyes flicked to her face. "We don't. Not yet. At least not in detail. She's 15, and she'll see something's wrong, but let's not drag her into the ugliness." She gazed into her coffee, lips tight. "Okay." The day stretched out like an endless road. We tried to function like normal humans, pretending to be civil, even polite, each of us retreating to different parts of the house to handle emails or chores. Around midday, the doorbell rang, and I tensed. She walked to the door before I could stop her. Through the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Tom standing there, a bouquet of white lilies in his hand. He looked uneasy, glancing past her to see if he could spot me. I stepped out from around the corner, arms folded. My stare drilled into him. "I need to speak with him," he said softly to her. Then to me, "Michael, please." Her eyes were wide, uncertain. I gave a curt nod, gesturing for her to step aside. She did, glancing anxiously between us. Tom took a single step in, offering me the flowers. My lip curled in disgust. I motioned for him to follow me into the living room. Once there, he set the bouquet on the coffee table as though it were a peace offering. I stood on the opposite side, arms still crossed. Rebecca hovered near the door, looking ready to intervene if we lunged at each other. Tom cleared his throat. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. "I never meant for things to go this far." I was silent, giving him the chance to keep talking. My nostrils flared, heart hammering. He let out a breath. "If it means anything, I respect what you two had. He hesitated. She was in a dark place, and we connected. It happened. I'm not proud, but it's the truth." "You respect what we had," I repeated, voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's why you brought flowers. Another demonstration of your feelings for my wife." He flushed. "No, they're for both of you. Or maybe just to say I'm sorry." Damn it, I'm not good at this. I just want to fix it somehow. My rage simmered, but I saw an odd vulnerability in his posture. He was no towering monster, but a man who'd stepped over the line. Doesn't mean I forgave him, but it humanized him. At least. I looked at Rebecca. She chewed her lip, eyes darting between us. I let out a long exhale and said, "You can't fix this, she and I. We need to decide what happens next." Tom nodded. "I understand." He cast a glance at her, something almost tender in it. The muscles in my jaw twitched, my fists clenched. Then he offered a halting, If you need space, I'll go. But I want you to know I won't push. I just can't pretend it never happened." I didn't trust myself to speak. Instead, I stared at him with a bitterness I couldn't hide. After a beat, I said, "Get out." He swallowed, nodded, and looked at her once more. She didn't move from her spot. He turned and walked away, leaving the bouquet on the table. The front door closed softly behind him. She let out a trembling breath. For a long moment, we stayed like that, separated by the living room. The hush roared in my ears. Finally, I shoved the bouquet to the floor with the back of my hand, letting the lilies scatter across the rug. An ugly satisfaction flared in my chest as I watched the petals crush underfoot. She blinked, but said nothing. Time slipped into an awkward lull. Our daughter came home that afternoon, bounding through the door with the energy of a teen who'd had a fun sleepover. The moment she saw our strained expressions, her enthusiasm died on her lips. She gave me a puzzled look, and I mustered a weak smile, ruffling her hair. She cast a worried glance at her mother, but neither of us explained. We just pretended everything was fine, asked about her weekend. It broke my heart to lie, but I couldn't muster the words to tell her that her family had just imploded. That evening, after our daughter retreated to her room, I confronted Rebecca in the kitchen. The tension was suffocating. "We can't keep this up," I said in a low voice. "Living under the same roof, pretending for her sake." She nodded, tears threatening again. "I know. But do you want me to leave? Is that it?" I stared at the tile floor. "I don't know what I want." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Part of me wants to wipe the slate clean. But that's impossible. Another part wants to cling to some hope that we can salvage what's left." She studied my face. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. "Therapy, time apart, anything. I just need you to believe that I never stopped caring for you, that I hated seeing you in pain after the accident, and I felt so guilty for." She closed her eyes, voice quivering. I glanced at the ceiling, blinking hard. After a painful pause, I said, "Right now, I feel like all we have is a big pile of broken pieces." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then let's start by picking them up, one by one." We tried. Over the next week, she slept in the guest room while I returned to the master bedroom. Not because I wanted the bed that reeked of betrayal, but because it was physically more comfortable for me after my surgeries and lingering aches. Still, I stripped the sheets and washed them twice, as if trying to remove every trace of him. We barely touched each other, but we talked more. We spoke in hushed voices when our daughter was in earshot. Nights were the hardest, lying awake with the ghost of that other man's presence hanging in the dark corners. I was about to schedule a marriage counseling session when I found a missed call from Tom again. My heart raced. Was he going to fight for her, or was it something else? I considered ignoring it, but curiosity ate at me. So I called back. He answered almost immediately, voice subdued. "Michael," he said, "thank you for calling. Look, I'm not trying to stir things up, but I wanted you to know that I'm done. I accepted a transfer to another branch. I'm leaving this city." I drew in a breath, uncertain how to respond. Was I supposed to thank him? Yell at him? He continued, "I want you to have your family. If she wants me, well, that's up to her, but I'm not going to interfere. I'm sorry for the pain I caused." A strange relief and an equally strange pang stirred in me. I mumbled something vaguely acknowledging, then hung up. I headed home with the news. She was in the living room, Tidying up, and I told her. She paused, a flurry of mixed emotions crossing her features. Sadness, guilt, maybe relief. He didn't tell me, she said softly. I shrugged. Said he's leaving soon. She nodded, swallowing. Then she sank into the armchair, burying her face in her hands. I could see the tension in her shoulders and realized with a jolt that she was grieving. Grieving him, even if she claimed she wasn't sure if she loved him. My teeth clenched, but I kept quiet. It was a bitter pill, but I couldn't deny what I saw. Days passed, blurring into a routine of polite cooperation. We tried to plan a session with a counselor, though I wasn't sure if I was ready to open up. Meanwhile, nightmares continued to plague me. I'd wake in cold sweats, certain I'd just glimpsed something from that dark time in the hospital, or that weird dream about half-siblings. My daughter noticed my exhaustion and asked if I was okay. I lied to her face. I'm fine, honey. Just busy with work. Rebecca, for her part, seemed determined to prove her devotion, asking how she could help, cooking dinners, trying to lighten my load. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it softened the edges of my anger. I caught myself watching her, noticing small gestures, like how she fiddled with her wedding ring when she was anxious, or the way her eyes flickered with sadness whenever she passed the guest room. We were two wounded people, trapped in a cycle of attempts and regrets. Yet the pajamas with Tom's "My Beloved" scrawl still haunted me. I'd shoved them in the back of the closet, but the memory was lodged in my mind. One afternoon, I pulled them out and stared at that phrase. Something inside me snapped. I walked downstairs, found Rebecca in the living room. She looked up from her phone, startled to see me clutching the pajamas. Without a word, I tossed them onto the coffee table. "Burn them," I said quietly, "or throw them away. I don't care which. Just get them out of this house." She swallowed hard, tears brimming, and nodded. Okay. A few nights later, I stood on the balcony again, barefoot, letting the cold air numb my feet. The city shimmered below like an ocean of lights. That same heaviness lingered in the air, as though a storm were on the horizon. I exhaled, letting the chill fill my lungs. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out a scrap of paper with some lines I jotted down earlier that day. "You are free. You can do what you want. But you're no longer my choice." I smoothed the paper between my palms, feeling how each word cut. Maybe I was writing a short letter, maybe a final statement. I thought about the vow I once made, in sickness and in health, for better or worse. Did betrayal fit into that vow? Could I forgive her? More importantly, could I live with myself if I did? I heard soft footsteps behind me. She slipped onto the balcony, careful to keep a respectful distance. "It's cold," she murmured. "You'll get sick." I shrugged. "Better than feeling nothing." She sighed, hugging herself. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice shaky. "I know I've said it 100 times, but I can't stop saying it. I hate what I did to us." I glanced at her. In the glow of the city lights, her face looked older, etched with regret. Yet I could still see the woman I fell in love with. My wife. The mother of our child. "So do I said softly. Then I pressed the note into her hand. "Read this." She looked down, reading my words by the faint light. Her shoulders tensed, breath catching. She read them again, and finally raised tear-filled eyes to me. Am I free now?" I swallowed, the ache in my throat returning. "You always were," I said. "But now, I have to choose what I can live with." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I understand." It felt like a final moment between us, but there was still a fragile thread connecting us. Neither of us moved. Finally, she whispered, "Will you ever want me again?" The question sliced me open. I closed my eyes, the memory of her with him swirling in my mind. Then I recalled the nights in the hospital, the faces of nurses, the beep of machines, her face leaning over me with trembling lips. She wasn't always faithless. She was a woman who, under pressure and heartbreak of her own, made a terrible choice. Did that excuse her? Maybe not. But it complicated things. I love you, I confessed, voice hoarse. I hate what you did, but I can't just flip a switch and stop loving you. She choked on a sob, clinging to the balcony rail. Please, can we try? I exhaled, forcibly unclenching my jaw. This was the hardest step, deciding whether to walk away or fight for something that might already be dead. My mind whirred with memories. The day we got married, the day our daughter was born, the day I woke from my coma to her tear-streaked face, and then the day I saw her with someone else. The swirl of love and loathing threatened to drown me, but beneath the bitterness, a tiny spark told me there might still be something left to save. I took a tentative step closer. She reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. I let her slender fingers slip between mine. Her skin was warm despite the cold air. She leaned in slightly, her breath hitching, her tears wetting her cheeks. My heart pounded like a broken drum. Maybe we would destroy each other in the process, or maybe we find a way to rebuild. But the choice had to be mine. We stood there for what felt like hours, silent except for our ragged breaths. Then I gently pulled my hand free. I need time, I said firmly. She nodded, pressing her lips together to keep from sobbing again. Take all you need. I stepped inside, letting the warmth of the house envelop me. She stayed out there alone for a few minutes, staring at the city lights. Eventually, I heard the balcony door slide shut. She passed me in the living room, heading quietly up the stairs. The note was still clutched in her hand. I watched her silhouette disappear, a complex tangle of longing and resentment swirling in my chest. Over the following weeks, we made halting attempts at therapy. Sometimes we spoke calmly. Sometimes our voices rose in angry arguments. The counselor encouraged us to express our pain. I recounted how I felt robbed of the chance to recover with my wife by my side. She explained how lost and lonely she was, how she needed someone to lean on. We circled around these confessions like boxers sparring in a ring, each bracing for the other's blow. Our daughter sensed the tension but was grateful we hadn't forced her into the middle of it. I teetered between hope and despair. Some days, I felt like maybe we could push through, find a new normal. Other days, the memory of that laughter, that half-naked scene in our bedroom, made me want to walk out the door and never come back. Yet something kept me tethered. Maybe the years of love that preceded the betrayal, maybe the child we shared, maybe my own fear of being alone. One night, a fight erupted over something trivial. I snapped at her for forgetting to buy groceries. She snapped back about my moody silences. We escalated until she shouted, "If you hate me so much, why are you still here?" Her words echoed in the hallway. Our daughter was behind her bedroom door. I prayed she couldn't hear. "You think I'd want to be here?" I snarled, voice rasped. "I'm here because I cut myself off, breath shuddering. Damn it, I still love you, even if it kills me." Her anger wavered, and tears brimmed again. "I never wanted that," she whispered. We stood there, hearts pounding, a sick swirl of tension in the air. Then I stormed into the study and slammed the door. Minutes later, I heard her footsteps recede, her soft weeping drifting through the walls. I sank against the desk, burying my face in my hands. My chest ached with the weight of it all. That same night, I had a violent nightmare. The accident, the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, the smell of blood. Then I was lying in a dark corridor, and she was leading Tom by the hand toward a locked door. They didn't see me, didn't even notice my broken body on the floor. I was screaming, but no sound came out. When I finally woke, my pulse was racing so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. I stumbled out of bed, chest heaving. In the hallway, the faint light from under her bedroom door told me she was still awake. But I retreated back into the study, too shaken to talk. Morning arrived, quiet and subdued. We made coffee in silence, exchanging weary glances, Neither of us mentioned the previous night's argument. She left for work, and I stayed home, trying to force words onto a blank page for a freelance project. Instead, I found myself doodling random lines in the margins. She's free, but I'm not. I'm chained to love, chained to memory. Over and over, variations of the same thought. Time marched forward. I forced myself to focus on the present, paying bills, tidying the house, taking walks, helping our daughter with her homework, cooking dinners we scarcely ate. The tension between Rebecca and me remained, thick, but no longer as explosive. It felt like we were both exhausted from the emotional warfare, tiptoeing around the open wound. Then, one evening, I found a letter she'd written, left on my desk. Short, heartfelt, scrawled in her curving handwriting. I know I can never erase what I did. I know I stole something precious from us. You're right. I was free. I was always free. But now, I realize I don't want that kind of freedom if it means losing you. I'll always regret what happened. But I swear, I'll do everything I can to help you heal, if you let me. If not, I will leave. And I will forever be sorry. I read it twice, tears burning my eyes. Somehow, this felt more honest than any conversation we'd had so far. A note can sometimes convey raw truths we can't speak aloud. I waited for her to come home that night, my heart pounding. When she walked through the door, she glanced at me, eyes wary. I told our daughter to go upstairs for a bit, that I needed to talk to her mother. She obliged, though with a concerned expression. We settled in the living room, the same place Tom had once stood with his damned bouquet. I watched her grip the arm of the sofa. I held her note in my hand. I read it. I said. She nodded, blinking rapidly. I inhaled, focusing on the swirl of anger and longing in my chest. Part of me wants to say, it's too late. But another part of me knows that I never stopped loving you either, even when I wanted to rip our house apart. Her shoulders trembled. I understand. I don't know how this story ends, I said, my voice raw, but I know I'm not ready to throw away everything. A tear fell down her cheek. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, I found myself crossing the room and reaching for her hand. She clasped mine, and her touch felt like a lifeline. For the first time in a long while, I folded her into my arms, though I kept some distance, as if uncertain how fully to hold her. She sank against me, trembling with silent sobs. I buried my face in her hair, inhaling the faint scent of her shampoo, tears burning the corners of my eyes. We stood there, locked in that tentative embrace, half in sorrow, half in hope. Eventually, she pulled back enough to look at me, searching my face. I brushed a tear from her cheek. My voice almost gave out, but I whispered, "This isn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it's not goodbye either." She nodded, sniffling. "I understand. I'll do whatever you need." We tried moving forward from that point, slowly, painfully, but with some sense that it was possible. Therapy sessions continued. We had days when I could see a future for us and days when it felt hopeless, but we were at least united in the effort, which was more than I could have imagined a few weeks before. One afternoon, I found myself in the bedroom, rummaging for something in the closet, when I stumbled across a small box of photos, ours, from better times. I flipped through them. Our wedding day. Our honeymoon by the beach. The day she found out she was pregnant. I traced my finger over her smile. A wave of longing hit me, followed by a wave of fury at how we'd lost this innocence. Still, I placed the photos back gently. In the days that followed, I tried to open up more about my anxieties, my nightmares, the sense of losing who I was after the accident. She listened, tears often in her eyes, but no denial. She apologized, not in a perfunctory way but with real sorrow. We kept some space between us physically, neither of us quite ready for deeper intimacy, though we kissed sometimes, softly, uncertainly, as though reacquainting ourselves with a once familiar dance. Then came the inevitable day when I found myself in front of my laptop, a blank document open, and realized I had something to say. Not just a letter. A story. My own story, raw and unfiltered. I typed with trembling fingers, describing the accident, the coma, the slow return to consciousness, the love that once nurtured me, and the betrayal that nearly destroyed me. The words poured out like water from a broken dam. Tears stung my eyes as I relived the moment of seeing them together, the year she'd spent with him, while I was struggling to remember my own name. But I also wrote about the faint hope that flickered now, the possibility that we might build something new, though it would never be the same as before. Late that night, she found me at my desk, eyes swollen from writing and crying. Without a word, she placed her hands on my shoulders, gently massaging. I felt the tension ease a fraction. Then she leaned in, pressed her cheek to mine. I let out a shaky breath, turning my head so our foreheads touched. Neither of us spoke, but in that moment I sensed that we were on the same page at last, even if it was a page stained with tears and regrets. Time is a funny thing. It doesn't erase wounds, but it can dull them if we work at it. In the weeks that followed, we took cautious steps closer, had difficult conversations, opened old wounds in therapy, apologized again and again. Our daughter sensed the shift and gradually relaxed around us. She didn't need to know every detail, just that her parents were trying to heal. And then, one morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't dreamt about the accident or her betrayal that night. Instead, my sleep had been dreamless, or at least peaceful. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the house. She was in the guest room still, but we talked about maybe sharing the bed again soon. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. The images of her and Tom might haunt me, but at least they weren't overshadowing my every breath. I rose, walked to the balcony, barefoot as always, letting the morning air wash over me. The city was waking up, the sky pale gold. My phone buzzed on the table behind me. I checked it, an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Tom's voice, low and hesitant. "I'm leaving today," he said. I wanted to say goodbye. My chest tightened. I stepped back from the balcony railing, swallowing hard. "Goodbye, then," I said, keeping my voice even. He paused. "I hope you both find a way to be happy. She deserves it. And so do you." I pressed my lips together, half wanting to hurl the phone off the balcony. But part of me recognized a man who was also broken in his own way. "Yeah," I managed, before hanging up. The line went silent. The final note of a chapter that should never have been written. I let out a breath, staring at the phone. Then I set it on the table. Gradually, I felt an odd sense of closure settle around me. He was gone. It didn't rewrite the past, but it gave me space to try to move forward. I heard movement inside the house. She emerged, rubbing her eyes, hair mussed from sleep, wearing a robe cinched tightly around her waist. We locked gazes across the living room. I met her halfway, near the couch. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then I lifted a hand to her face, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. She swallowed, eyes brimming with tentative hope. Slowly, softly, I leaned in and touched my lips to hers. It was gentle, uncertain, but it was a real kiss, maybe the first since all this began that wasn't marred by guilt or anger. She let out a quiet exhale, sinking against me. For a moment, I felt the old familiarity of her body, her warmth. My mind flickered with the memory of betrayal, but I tried to focus on the present. This woman, in my arms, trembling with remorse and a quiet, desperate love. After we parted, she touched her forehead to mine. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "For giving me a chance." I nodded, stepping back slightly, still holding her hand. "Don't make me regret it," I said in a low, hoarse voice. She swallowed. "I won't. I promise." We stood there, a silence filled with possibilities. Our daughter's door opened upstairs, footsteps coming down. We let go of each other, not wanting to put her on the spot. But I felt a weight lift off my chest. Something new was beginning, something that might still break or might just grow stronger. At least now, we were both there, fully present, ready to face whatever came next. Later that day, I typed another line into my laptop, in the document where I'd been pouring my confessions. Maybe forgiveness doesn't come in a single moment. Maybe it's a slow process, day by day, tear by tear, apology by apology, until the pain dulls enough that you can see the love shining behind it. And maybe that's enough. I stared at the words, letting them sink into me. Then I breathed out, saved the file, and closed the laptop. I realized my hands had stopped shaking. Outside, the sky was no longer heavy with storm clouds. The sun peeked through, lighting the furniture in a warm glow. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that we might survive this, that she and I could still choose each other, wounded, flawed, but stubbornly refusing to let our story end in bitterness. I recalled the note I'd once written for her, the one that read, "You are free, but now you are not my choice." Strange how words evolve in meaning as we heal. Because maybe now my choice, after everything, was to walk forward with her if she truly wanted to stay. Perhaps love is never simple, never perfect, but is it ever too late to hold on? My heart thudded with both fear and hope. We'd reached the brink of destruction. But she was still here, and so was I. And so I drew a fresh page from my notebook, picked up a pen, and wrote, "Love has many faces. Sometimes it's fierce and unbreakable, and sometimes it fractures under pressure. But if at the end of it all, you find even a glimmer of light to guide you back, maybe that's enough to believe in again." I set the pen down, feeling an odd sense of calm. No matter what the future held, I was no longer drowning in that initial fury. I was living with the knowledge of her betrayal, but also the knowledge that despite everything, somehow, impossibly, maybe foolishly, I still loved her. And that fragile truth, for now, would be my path forward.